Hi class, today we're going to cover our last section in chapter 6, which is trapezoids and kites. Our objectives today are just to apply the properties of trapezoids and to apply the properties of kites. So, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair of parallel sides. And then we have a special type of trapezoid, which is an isosceles trapezoid. This has parallel bases and congruent legs. Okay, and then also we have both pairs of base angles are congruent. Base angles would be like F and J are together, and then G and H. Those are going to both be congruent. Also, in an isosceles trapezoid, the diagonals are also congruent. So lots of parts that are congruent and angles that are congruent. All right, so let's also look at this property about the mid-segment. The mid-segment of a trapezoid is a segment that connects the midpoints of the legs of the trapezoids. So midpoint is going to be in the middle, so that means it's created two congruent sides. All right, so our trapezoid mid-segment theorem says the mid-segment of the trapezoid is parallel to each base, and its measure is 1/2 the sum of the legs of the bases. So all three of these are going to be parallel. And then it says its measure, so VS is 1/2 of the sum. So sum is going to be, we're going to take QR and add it to UT. So those are our two bases. And then it's 1/2 of that. So if we divide that by 2, that's going to give us VS, or our mid-segment. So let's put that to use, our properties that we just talked about to use, and find the measure of angle D. Now we see that this is isosceles trapezoid because it has those congruent marks and parallel sides. So therefore the base angles are congruent. So this angle D is going to be 101 degrees. All right, then to go ahead and find our angle B, we're dealing with a quadrilateral, and we know our interior angle sum of the angles in a quadrilateral is 360. So if we subtract out our 101 and our other 101, what's left over is going to be A and B combined. So if we divide that by 2, because we know they are congruent, we are going to get 79 degrees. All right, so let's go ahead to the second page and look at JKLM. It is an isosceles trapezoid. If angle JML, so JML is going to be this whole angle here, is 130, and KN, so this portion here, is 6.7 feet, and MN is this other half here, it's going to get a little tight, is 3.6. Find the following. So MJK. MJK. So we need to find that other angle, knowing JML. Well, if we take 180 and minus the 130, which is that angle, what we have left is 50, which is going to be our angle right here, because we know that our two angles in a quadrilateral that are consecutive are supplementary. So 50 degrees. Then it asks us to find JL. Well, JL is going to be our diagonal, which is congruent to our other diagonal, which is, we know, is 6.7 and 3.6. So go ahead and finish that one up for tomorrow by adding those two, and we know that they are going to be congruent to the other diagonal. Okay, looking at number 4. Given DFGH is a trapezoid with bases DF and GH. All right, so let's just draw what we have so far. We have a base DF, oops, not both at one, but DF and GH. All right, so let's pick up where DF is 5 and GH is 17. Find the mid-segment. So we want to find this. Well, if we remember our formula, we have our base 1 plus our base 2 and divide it by 2. So we are going to take our 5 plus 17 and divide it by 2. 5 plus 17 gives us 22. Divided by 2, we know our mid-segment is going to be 11. All right, so in the figure, MN is the mid-segment of trapezoid FGJK. Find the value of x. So I want you to use our knowledge about mid-segments, look back at our last problem, and find the value for x. Okay, now let's talk about kites. A kite is a quadrilateral with exactly 2 pairs of consecutive congruent sides. Consecutive, remember, means they're going to be right next to each other. So that you can see here in our picture, those two are congruent because they're next to each other, and those two are congruent and they're next to each other. In a kite, only one pair of opposite angles are congruent. One pair. And in this one, opposite angles, so it's either going to be, here we see in our picture, J and L. So angle J is congruent to angle L. And that is going to be formed by the non-congruent sides. So that means that the two sides that aren't congruent, like there, those two are going to form our angles. All right, so let's talk about diagonals in a kite. Diagonals are perpendicular in a kite, and therefore it creates some right angles, as you can see in our drawing. And then the diagonal between the non-congruent sides, non-congruent angles, bisect a pair of angles. So what that means is my diagonal that's not going from my congruent angles, so that would be A and C, we know are not congruent. It's bisecting those angles though. So I'm going to throw in some marks. And in one down by the A's, I did 1 marks, and down by the C's, I did 2 because those two angles are not congruent to each other. So I can say that AC bisects angle A and angle C. Okay, so let's go ahead and look here at problem 6. WXYZ is a kite. Find angle XYZ. So XYZ. So to find that angle, well, let's think about it. Let's put in some information we know, which the only thing we do know is that that's going to be 121 because those are going to be opposite angles that are congruent because they're formed by the non-congruent sides. Whew, that seems a little slightly confusing. But we're dealing with a quadrilateral, and we know quadrilaterals add up to 360. So if I minus out the information I know, not 31, 21, minus another 121, that's going to give us our angle X, Y, Z. So if we go ahead and subtract those, we learn that our angle XYZ is going to be 45 degrees. Okay, number 7, MNPQ is a kite. Find NP. Well, here's NP that we want to find, which is congruent to my other side, MN. Well, if I look closely, MN has created a triangle with the other two sides where we know their measures. And we know that this is a right triangle because we're dealing with kites. So if you take 8 squared plus 6 squared, you're going to find MN squared. Go ahead and solve that and let me know what it is tomorrow. And then when you find MN, we know that that's congruent to our NP. All right, so let's go ahead and take a moment to look at 8 and 9, and I'll just help you get them set up, and then they'll be for tomorrow. FGHJ is a kite. Find the measure of GFJ. GFJ is going to be my angle right here, which happens to be congruent with the my other angle. Well, all 4 of them are going to add up to 360. And then I'm going to subtract out what I know. And what's left is angle F and angle H together, so I have to divide by 2. Do the calculations for tomorrow, and then in number 9, if WXYZ is a kite, find ZY. So I'm just going to point out here is ZY, and you know that that's 24 and that one's 8. So go ahead and use your mathematical knowledge to finish that up for tomorrow. We'll see you guys then.